Great. So again, my name is Isabelle Carpenter, and today I will be presenting on gender and language in a multilingual Morocco. So just to begin, I'd like to sort of direct your attention to the predominant discourse that we see here in the United States surrounding Arab and Muslim women. These are the images that I got when I plugged these two terms into Google Images. We see women who are fully veiled in burqa or niqab. We see them standing in the bombed out ruins, crying in their cities. And then, if you go to the articles behind these images, they paint an even darker picture. They warn us of the women of ISIS, tell us about the things women in Saudi Arabia cannot do. They warn of the lack of women's education in the Middle East. We see a picture of an oppressed and silent victim. But I lived in the Arab world, I lived in Morocco, and my experience was very different. So I lived in this city, on this street, hung out with these women. That's me, wearing hijab. We just delivered a baby. It was horrifying. And I took care of this little kid. And what I saw around me were vibrant, talkative women who very much held their own. They were not victims. And particularly, I was fascinated by the ways in which they could switch seamlessly between different languages to talk about different things. And so I set out to discover the story behind this linguistic phenomenon. And what began as an inquiry into how Moroccan women use language has led me to a twofold thesis. The first is that women in Morocco use language to assert agency in a primarily conservative and patriarchal society. And the second is that a postmodern framework is necessary to adequately convey the diversity of women's language use and to facilitate the use of cross-cultural findings. So in order to support these assertions, I'll begin first by offering you some cultural, religious, and linguistic background from Morocco, before moving on to examine and dismantle some of the dichotomies that I found in the literature. And then finally, I will explore the different ways in which Moroccan women use code switching to assert agency and to show the diversity and contextual dependence of these different language uses. Before I do that, though, I'd like to offer you first two definitions. The first is code switching, which is the practice of alternating between two languages or language varieties within a single conversation. And the second is postmodern feminism, which is the framework through which I will be analyzing this issue. And it is one that opens up the possibility of a multiplicity of identities that are continually in the process of formation in dialogue with the context that surrounds them. This framework puts an emphasis on diversity rather than difference, which is something that I will keep coming back to over the course of this presentation. So this is Morocco. It's located here. It's the farthest west of all the Arab states and is separated from Spain by just 8 short miles. Its native inhabitants and language are the Berbers or the Amazigh, but Morocco was conquered in the 8th century by Arab conquerors who brought with them both Islam and the Arabic language. Today, the majority of Morocco is in fact Arab rather than Berber. And then once more in 1912, Morocco was colonized by the French and remained a protectorate until 1956. And so we see in this country a fascinating cultural, linguistic, religious blend that I think is pretty hard to find anywhere else. And this project will focus particularly on 4 of the most widely spoken languages: Moroccan Arabic, Berber, Modern Standard Arabic, and French. And I apologize for the blurry picture, but I thought this was kind of cool. It's a road sign on which you have each of these languages. And so these two are the unwritten native languages to Morocco, but today are considered sort of low-status languages, while these imported languages retain vestiges of prestige thanks to their connection with religion. In the case of Modern Standard Arabic, it's the language of the Quran, and French, because of its connection with the West and administration. And so in the existing literature, I noted a number of binaries created in an attempt to categorize Moroccan women's language use, setting up polls like public versus private, male versus female, status versus solidarity. Scholars would place one language on one poll, like Modern Standard Arabic as a male language and Berber as a female language, and would argue that women align themselves with those values whenever they speak those languages. However, I thought that by giving languages associations and meaning in this static way just doesn't work anymore. This type of binary model is outdated, inadequate, and inaccurate to describe the diverse ways in which Moroccan women use language. And there are, of course, scholars who are pushing the discourse away from this binary model, such as Reem Bassouni from the American University of Cairo, or Fatima Siddiqui, a researcher in Fez. But the problem is they continue to frame their arguments in dialogue with outdated linguistic theories. So Bassouni, for example, takes a chapter in her book, Arab Sociolinguistics, to dispute deficit theory, which contends that women simply use an inferior form of men's language. And she says that this theory frames women as powerless, when in fact they're constantly negotiating their own relationship with language, and cites a study that found women are more likely to use powerful and insistent language when negotiating in the souk, which flies in the face of deficit theory. And then Siddiqui takes on dominance theory, which says that women's language use is primarily shaped by their iniquity and marginalization within society. But she also says that this is overly simplistic and too focused on male-female relationships, rather than taking into account the diverse power dynamics across socioeconomic class and within all female spaces. But the problem with this is that dominance theory and deficit theory have already been largely debunked by Western sociolinguistics, and these frameworks have been superseded by the postmodern framework that I've been talking about. Both of these women and their research are speaking to the nuance and diversity of postmodern feminism, but they simply fail to construct their arguments in dialogue with other postmodernists, rather falling back on these outdated linguistic theories. So because of this, I chose to take data that was presented by Bassouni and Siddiqui, sorted into 3 categories of association, and then analyze that through a postmodern feminist lens. So I broadly sorted code-switching motivations into these 3 categories: to demand or divert attention, to include or exclude outsiders, and to identify with or reject aspects of a language's associated culture. And I show that in all 3 cases, these different languages can play any of these roles depending on context, moving away from the static binary models of before. So for example, French and Standard Arabic can both be used by women to call attention to themselves and exert themselves, demand attention, but simply in different times. So in personal conversations, women may use French to signal that they would like to speak and that this is a women's conversation and the men should probably take a step back. But in a professional context, if a woman wants to draw attention to herself, she'll be much more effective doing so in modern Standard Arabic. Another example is a woman may switch into French to escape the moralizing religious attitudes that are associated with Arabic if she wants to talk about her love life. But in that same sentence, she'll switch back into Arabic to curse, thus using both languages in an intimate and taboo way, but just if in different moments. So essentially, what I'm arguing is no language has a single association or identity, but rather is shaped continually by the context. And so why does this matter? I think that this is important for 2 reasons. The first is that I think it is critical to continue to demonstrate to the West the power and agency of Arab and Muslim women, to show that Arab and Muslim women have a voice and opinion and they know how to use it. And second, I think it's important to move the scholarly conversation surrounding this issue into postmodern feminist terms, not only because it's simply the more effective way to discuss Moroccan women's language use, but also because it will facilitate scholarly conversation across cultures. There's still a lot of research and work that needs to be done in this field. I had many questions that I was unable to answer. But I believe that by shifting this work, the important work that has been done by Bassouni and Siddiqui and others on the issue of gender and language in Morocco into postmodern feminist terms, these scholars can more easily draw upon and engage with work that is being done across the world. Because dialogue is always easier with a shared lens and language. So when I first gave my research proposal, I said that I wanted to dismantle images of women, Arab women, as silent and oppressed victims by using their own language. And I hope that today I have done not only that, but have also added my own voice to the advancement of this discourse. Thank you.